Hello and welcome. In this video, which is about to change on your screen quite dramatically, it's the second part of the discussion that I had with Ramsey over at Rajathon about this book, which was Bloomsbury's 100 must-read science fiction. We talked about the books that were on there and which ones we'd read and which ones we felt were deserved picks for the title of must-read science fiction. However, in this video we ran through the last maybe half dozen books on the list that we hadn't covered in the first part, and then we got into what was my favourite parts of our discussion, which was what we felt about the list generally and what we looked for in science fiction. But most importantly, we then proposed a number of books that we felt should have been on there, and that was my absolute favourite part of the video, was sharing those with Ramsey and hearing about his picks as well, and the fact that I've actually been out and bought a couple of those books as well, so you will actually eventually see reviews of them on this channel. Anyway, I'm going to let you get straight into the video now. Enjoy. Hello, welcome back. I'm still here with Ramsey over at Rajathon. Make sure you subscribe to his channel as well as mine. And we are still counting down the 100 must-read science fictions. However, we are now in the back 50, heading for the 10th hole. No, it's 19th hole, isn't it, is the bar at the end of the golf course. We're heading for the 19th hole, and we just finished discussing Richard Matheson's I Am Legend. So if you want to hear what we had about that to say about that, or Frank Herbert, or Robert Heinlein, who else was in the first half?
A bunch of people. Let's see. William Gibson, Arthur Conan Doyle, Philip K. Dick, Arthur C. Clarke, Edgar Rice Burroughs. It's in alphabetical order. So if you like a sci-fi author that's in the top half of that order, that's where it was.
In the previous video.
Asimov.
I will try and remember. I'm useless at doing it, but I'll try and remember to link that in the description. So the next one on the list for me, George Orwell, 1984. It is one of those ones where you might not initially think of that as science fiction, but it is when you go, oh yeah, it is kind of set in what was the future for Orwell, quite a long way, like 40 years from when he was writing. So yeah, I can see why. And there's no doubt, as far as I'm concerned, that it is a classic text and thoroughly deserves to be on this list. It's just... Well, what can you say about Orwell that isn't already said a million times on YouTube, let alone the rest of the internet? Quality from start to finish, great prose, a really bleak story though, 1984.
One of the best reviews I've ever done on my channel too.
Is it?
Yeah.
I think I've definitely seen that one. I think that was the one actually that, you know, when you're looking at BookTube channels and you go, well, what have they reviewed? Have they read anything that I've read? I think that that's one of the things that actually made me look at your channel first, was your review of 1984.
I remember 1984, and so much of how we talk about surveillance has to do with 1984. Absolutely. Big Brother. Big Brother's watching you. The Eye, just like that, you know, somebody's watching. Like video screens, you know, we talk about it being science fiction. Literally video screens started with... 1984, like their TVs had a camera in it. I had no idea, like doublespeak, with like the explanation of doublespeak and how they were dumbing down language, I found so enthralling. And he had his finger on the button of what, you know, social constructs could be or would be. But yeah, so much of the social constructs that we know of today and we think of today really had a start in this book.
It is desperately sad as well to see people who think that they're doing the right thing, or I'm sure, at least I hope they think that, but are just making the same moves that you see from Ingsoc, the bad guys of 1984, playing out in front of you, and it's just really depressing.
You were saying that you don't have anything till Roadside Picnic?
Well, I own Man Plus by Frederick Pohl, but I haven't read it. Didn't you read Red Mars by Kim Stanley Robinson?
I own Red Mars, but I've read Frankenstein, and since we did our first video, I read Snow Crash.
Ah, so you read another one. Who's Snowcraft by?
Snow Crash is Neil Stephenson.
No, Snow Crash. Okay, so start with Frankenstein.
So Frankenstein, I initially read years ago. My mom bought these in America, we had these great illustrated classics. They were a hardback with basically no slipcover on it. So these hardcover books that were highly abridged. Yes, it looked a lot like this Great Expectations. So you've got the um, hardcover,
Hmm.
but they take a classic and they put it in this huge text with illustrations in it.
Okay.
So I initially read it heavily abridged, and I was like, okay, this is great, I love it. And then I read it again later in life, and they had taken out from that original abridged version all of the melancholy sadness of the monster, and they kind of just it was story, just the amazing amount of story and depth of character in this monster um, is just amazing. It's
I'll,
it's definitely a fun read,
yeah.
um, but it has that old Victorian style where you can take 10 minutes to tell a 1 minute story.
Yeah.
Just because of context, it belongs on the list. Like it has done so much for the genre.
Yeah.
First female author to really make a scene in sci-fi that I can think of. Um, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I was going to say, in terms of context, when you read, like Brian Aldiss wrote a book that's called A Thousand Millennia. I can't remember what it's called, but it's basically the history of science fiction. And he says it starts with that book. So that's how important it is. It should be read. I'm a little bit ashamed. I'm sort of sinking lower in my seat. Yeah. So what else did you say?
Um,
Snow Crash.
Snow Crash by Neil Stevenson. So this one also not a great book. I just did a review on it on the YouTube channel. This book had such forward thinking in science fiction and what internet culture would be like a metaverse. Like I'm pretty sure that Facebook stole it directly from this book.
Really?
Like Xbox Live, the creators talked about how they were big fans of Snow Crash and how that they were looking for that to try to create. Um, like the idea is that when like your TV goes all fuzzy, that's a snow crash. And so when your computer had a catastrophic failure, it was a snow crash. So there's this new street drug that not only wipes you out in the real world, but it also wipes you out in the digital world. So
Okay.
both of your personas um, go into a coma. And it deals heavily with like far or what I can't remember what that's called, like Sumerian, like Near Eastern. Is that Near Eastern, Far Eastern? I can't remember what they call that. But
Yeah.
like they were the master language. And then there was this virus that came out. Sorry, I keep right from my lip there. Um, and there's this virus that came out, and that was the cause of the biblical story of Babel. And it created confusion. And so there was a god Inky and a god, I can't remember what her name was. I wrote it down somewhere. Um, but so the two gods fought, and so she brought the virus in. So it was kind of tying together the story of Babel and the fall of man, where she brought the sin in, and then he tried to fix the sin. And so he created a cure for the virus, and then now they've tried to digitize this virus, and like everything's ones and zeros. So if you've ever done binary language,
Hmm.
like that was the master language, ones and zeros. And then Sumerian keyed into the master language, and all the other language split off of Sumerian. It was a really neat idea. It was a neat story. I only gave it 3 stars because it spends tons of time doing like, let's dig into this Sumerian language idea, let's dig into these gods, let's dig into this and that. And you get like 15 minutes of action, and then some very uncomfortable grown man, teenage girl sex that I was not a big fan of.
Okay. Is it a sizable book, like a thick one, or a?
No, it's 290 to 315 pages,
Oh,
something
right.
like that.
Okay. It might be something that I would check out. It's like when I
You
picked
could
up
get through it
Hyperion.
fairly quickly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Hyperion
yeah.
puts me off the size of it, but like 200-300 is about
The cool thing
average.
about Hyperion is it's split into 5 parts.
Is it?
So you can read a part and then kind of take a break and then read a part and take a break
Right,
because
okay.
each character tells their story.
All right, okay. We'll probably get to Hyperion in a bit, won't we? Simmons.
He's not on here. That's the one that I told you that I thought should be on here and wasn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've kind of preempted your what should be on the list discussion for later on then. I might edit that bit out.
No, I think I mentioned that last time.
Right. Okay. Anything else between Orwell and Roadside
You
Picnic?
have Roadside Picnic, which I did not read, but I do want to read.
Right. Okay. The thing with Roadside Picnic is it is very Russian.
Hmm.
And that you think, particularly for us, we're European, we're a few hundred miles down the road, you're in Russia. You think, it's like 2 hours, I think, the flight from London to Moscow. It's not. So you would think that our cultures would be more similar than they actually are. But when you
Very
read
different.
something like that, it really brings home that actually, for me, it feels more like if you've read a manga or something like that, it feels more like almost an Eastern culture than a Western one, because it is just so strange. And of course, they have the typical Russian things of just, I'm going to, like drinking is just the natural part of my day. I will drink until I pass out. And that's just normal for these people. And of course, it is the
Mm.
Soviet era as well. But it is really, really good. There is the way that the guy, I can't remember the character's name, the lead guy, tries to work his way through these zones that were left when the aliens came. Because they came, they visited, they stayed for a while, and then they just left, and nobody really understands why. And that's kind of great in that an alien intellect may well be beyond our understanding anyway. But they've left trash everywhere and bits
Yeah.
that nobody really knows their true purpose, but they have value. So it's just all these weird things going on, and he's kind of clever the way he works out how to get to these things. But he's also like a bit of a jerk. But I think perhaps if you were Russian, you wouldn't think that he was a bit of a jerk. But for me,
You would
it's
think
like
he's just a Russian guy.
he's just an ordinary guy. But it's like the way he's like drinking and getting like aggressively angry, sort of bordering on fighting with people that there's just really no need to. And you're like, this guy's a bit of a jerk.
Hmm.
And then there's zombies, and you're like, where did that come from? But it is kind of, that's why I say it's kind of like the Japanese influence, or that sort of similar culture, because the Japanese text can be a little bit like that, and that they just go, I'm going to throw this in because I want to, and not because it means anything or goes anywhere. And you're like,
Hmm.
okay, but we tend not to do that very much in the West. If we do that, then tends to find you
It's
tend to find,
got some meaning
yeah,
behind it.
or people are critical of it for being pointless or a waste of time. That part of whatever the text is.
I first heard about that book when I was playing. So I'm the kind of nerd that when I do something or play something, I look for the references or what's going on. So I was playing Metro 2033, the video game, like the
Hmm.
original computer game, and then they had Metro first Last Light. That's what it was, Metro Last Light. And so those were supposed to be Metro 2033 and Metro 2034, and then this newest one is supposed to be 2035, from what I understand. But when you play the game, there's a lot of things in the game that are not um, in the book. So what I had been told is that when they created the game, they took parts of Roadside Picnic and brought it into the game. So it really, the video game is Metro 2033, the book, which I enjoyed quite a bit, and Roadside Picnic put together.
Right, okay. I've not played the Metro games, but I do understand that I think there's actually a game. Perhaps that's the one that was based on the film, as well as on the book, and there's been films made of it as well. So it has become sort of more cross-cultural. It's other media as well. It's sort of become this thing in reaching a wider audience. I've actually read The Weekend Begins on Monday, Saturday Begins on Monday. It's another book by them with a strange sort of title, which really deals with sort of Soviet era bureaucracy, and that book is much the same as well. You really could toss a coin to choose between them, but also weird.
I
enjoyable but weird.
if you can find the Metro video game, and if you're into video games, I found it for like $5, and it was definitely worth $5.
Okay. I'm more likely, I think, these days, rather than to buy and play it, would be to find a playthrough of somebody else on YouTube and have a look at it. But I
Oh
think
yeah.
I will do that just to see the roadside picnic
If
references.
you watch my 2033 review, I'm not in it like my face. It's just me playing the video game.
Right. Okay.
So I'm talk about the book while the video game's going on. Jules Verne, Journey to the Center of the Earth is my next one.
Okay.
It's not my favorite Jules Verne. My favorite Jules Verne is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Okay.
Really, really loved 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. It seemed more plausible because,
Yeah.
reading it today, we know that there's molten hot magma in the center of the Earth, and it's not dinosaurs and an underground lake. But really, really interesting that, like, basically everything prehistoric had moved into the center of the Earth, and the minute they got down there, giant flora, giant fauna, dinosaurs, giant lakes with its own weather. Really, really interesting story. They've made a couple really bad movies
I've seen
about
one.
them,
Yeah.
but they're fun, especially with your kids.
Mhm.
If you want the kids to enjoy a quick little movie, I think the first one's Brendan Fraser, the second one's The Rock, and they're fine. But for its time, it was probably amazing, and people loved it. And then we've done a lot more scientific discovery, and we
Yeah.
realized there's no way this could have ever happened. But it's super cool that we have it.
Doesn't Edgar Rice Burroughs have a very similar concept to one of his series where they go under the crust of the earth and there's another world in there, and it seems like that's probably been stolen from Verne. Is it Placid?
There in the Martian series, the Martian Chronicle. No, it's not. What do they call that?
Yeah, I think it is
I
the
have
Martian
I have a
Chronicle.
video on it. It is the Tales of Barsoom, is what it's called.
Yeah, yeah.
One of the books they do go down. There's an underground lake. The Black Martians live in the underground.
Right, okay.
We've both read Slaughterhouse-5, which is next by Kurt Vonnegut.
Yeah, we've both read this one.
I have the Sirens of Titan, which I have not read yet, but I have read this one.
I'm a little jealous because I would like the Sirens of Titan, and I'd like more Vonnegut, but you just don't see it over here. If they've got anything, it's Slaughterhouse-5 for students and nothing else.
I'll have to send you this one then.
No.
I think that's the third one I've found.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. You buy all three?
No, but if I found 3, I'll find more.
Yeah, like I said in the first half of this video, I'm so jealous of the American shops are so much better than ours, especially where I am.
I think you guys have the problem of people enjoy their books and keep their books, and we have a bunch of people who don't read anymore, and so they're like, well, can I get a couple bucks out of this? And they send it to a charity shop or a secondhand bookstore. And I mean, we have huge secondhand bookstores. Like, I don't buy new books because I don't have to, because people are just throwing away, buying a $22 book and throwing it away. I don't get it.
I don't buy new books if I can help it. It's very rare. But it does mean that when people recommend me a book, it takes me a long time to find it, which sometimes is half the fun of looking in various places for it. But I do wish I had more options.
Yeah.
There's like a good shop that is within walking distance, like it's about 15 minutes down the road from where I live. But other than that, there's nothing.
You said they don't turn over their stock very often, though, right?
No, because it's not like a busy shopping centre. So it's like you kind of make the effort to go there, or you don't go there. Anyway, Slaughterhouse-5, which I think is an absolute masterpiece. I absolutely love it, and I recommended it to you. And it's on one of those ones where I think most of the things I've recommended to you, we've been in agreement on, but not this one.
It's my mom's favorite book.
Is it?
Yeah,
hail to the mum.
It makes you think. it does exactly what I think it's trying to do, and it makes you go, all right, so this is a thought process on war, the devastation of war, and I feel a lot of the same way that I'm assuming Vonnegut feels about war, that it's unnecessary. Um, and I don't know if he swings to the side of war is never necessary, where I do believe there are times that war is necessary. When someone else wants to destroy you and your home and your family,
Hmm.
I think war is necessary. But he speaks about the type of things in war that are devastating. Like, you can Google Dresden and the firebombing of Dresden. Like,
Mm.
they destroyed innocent people, and it's really what he's talking about here. Um, and just you take kids out of their homes, send them to another country, send them to fight. You know, we have the same shared history of World War II, where
Mhm.
this was the fight, where our young men were all just taken, and generations of young men were taken and never came home because,
Yeah.
you know, what people were taken out of our societies because of this war. Who were, he was a optometrist, and how many optometrists were taken out that could have created the next great eye surgery, or you know um and he makes that point really well, like what families were never created. What it, it makes you think for sure.
Yeah. I think that that's the point of it. I think going back, you said like the war is, I say, you said like necessary. I would say sometimes unavoidable because
Hmm.
people are just unpleasant. But I mean, our own governments have caused problems by not being, oh, this is unavoidable, but saying this is something that we're going to go do and do it over there and get it out of our backyard, if you like. But
Hmm. Well, you look at like Ukraine now,
yeah,
they couldn't have avoided the war,
no,
but
but
you know
they have to
us,
fight it.
England and America, not many wars have been fought on our countries. We go to other people's countries to fight war.
Yeah. I mean, even in World War II, you think like pretty much everyone in Western Europe was invaded, but Britain wasn't. We were bombed, and we had the Battle of Britain, and the fight for naval and aerial superiority was pretty bad. And of course, I mean, not playing down the millions of people that we sent into Europe to die, but they didn't come here. And I think that that does cloud our judgment of what it's like. It's like, I think it's Paul Verhoeven, who directed RoboCop and things like that, was talking about his experience as a really young man of being in Holland when
Mm.
the troops went through and the things that he saw. And I think it does give you a different outlook if it's been on your doorstep.
I can imagine that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think bringing it back to the Slaughterhouse-Five, I think that is in part what Vonnegut is saying, is like, you're part of it. You can stop this. But
I think he said,
I don't necessarily agree with that. To be honest with you, I think that if it gets to the point that like of bombing Dresden, then it's gone too far. The only point that you can stop it is, right at the start. But even, if you look at the history of Europe prior to World War II, what could you have done? What could anyone have done to have stopped that?
well, and I think any compromises made with Hitler would have been a bad compromise.
Yeah,
It would have allowed him to still be the horrid man he was.
it would have been the exact same compromise that the Ukrainians had with the Russians when they gave them all
Hmm.
their nuclear missiles to secure peace. And that's the sort of compromise you get with people like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I agree.
cheery discussion on science fiction we're having. Let's get off this
Yeah.
topic and onto another book.
So you read The Time Machine, right?
I have, yeah.
I have as well. I enjoyed it.
I did too. I thought it was really good. I thought that, it says a little something about humanity.
I've heard some people take it to a racial place. Is that something you've ever dealt with?
I just don't want to. like, like,
Just throw a hand grenade into the conversation. Yeah.
can't we just discuss a nice science fiction book that's fun for everyone?
Well, it's I recently read some I don't know if this is maybe just horror, but I think it's science fiction too. Some Lovecraft,
Hmm.
and he was violently racist.
Yeah.
And so you look at it and you go, you know, in the Victorian era, because H.G. Wells was British, right?
Hmm. I think so.
So I don't think you guys, from what I understand, you guys didn't deal with the violent racism that we dealt with, but I know you guys did deal with it. Um, so I was wondering what if the Morlocks were, supposed to be African Americans or Arabic people or whatever. And he was kind of trying, saying, protecting the softer, nicer humans. Um,
The era that it would have been from would have been post slavery. It would have been at a time where attitudes were sort of casually racist in this country, in that it was just the accepted norm that
mhm.
on the evolutionary tract, white people were further along it than black people. That is what they believed. And there was a great deal of disagreement to that as well. And surprisingly enough, given the grief that religious types get, there were a lot of religious people that were involved in campaigning for the opposite view of that, to say, actually, God created everyone, and every
Mhm.
one of us then deserves to be treated as you would treat any other of God's creatures. Bearing in mind as well the ideas around the empire at the time, there was always this belief from the late 19th and right into the early 20th that when Victoria went, perhaps the empire would go as well. And she
Mm.
died in 1901, I think, or was it 1906? I think it was 1901.
She was at the time the longest living monarch until
Absolutely.
Elizabeth, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's been a long time since, about 60 years. I think she was 18, I think it was 1840 to 1901, something like that, or some part of the 1840s.
Your last one and my last one is the War of the Worlds.
Yeah. Which I think,
My favorite story about the War of the Worlds is the fact that it caused a panic because
yeah.
of a radio drama.
Oh, oh, my mind's gone completely blank. Orson Welles, yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I, I, I love that idea. I think that most people, when they tell this story, tell it in a way to make Americans look stupid. Like, how could they possibly fall for this? But I have heard, if you listen to it, it's done like news reports, and Orson Welles obviously is phenomenal. So
HG.
no, Orson
Is it
Welles.
Orson or HG?
Orson
It's Orson.
Welles did
You
the
have it written
radio.
down as
No, no,
HG.
no. H.G. Wells
Okay,
wrote it. Orson Welles did the radio drama that caused the
gotcha.
panic. So yeah, he is phenomenal, as is H.G. Wells, and I really do like the book. I think it's really good. I think it's thoroughly worth a place on this list. Perhaps 3 Wells books on a list of 100 is perhaps too many, but I can't argue with War of the Worlds, because we teach that if you're really, really lucky in secondary school here. And
Mm,
it's
we
just,
don't get that.
it's full of, it's just great. The tension of it, the exploration, like, it's even, I don't know, I find it completely convincing that at that time, the gentleman of England, if you like, would react in the way that is depicted in the book. And I just really like it. It's just not boring in any way. It just, there's a
I
reason
think
there's
the
100
interesting,
films.
yeah, I think the interesting way that they did it when they talk about the story is that people caught it mid program. So there wasn't the introduction of, hey, this is what's going on. This is, you turn on the thing and you're looking for news. And instead of news, you get this radio drama, which is very well done and fantastically written and performed and acted. And um, I would have loved to have heard it live. Maybe they have it recorded somewhere where I
I,
can listen to
I
it.
think you can listen to it on YouTube.
Okay.
I think it's available on YouTube. And I don't know that I've listened to it all the way through, but I had to listen to like the start of it to see what it was like. And I was like, yeah, this is good. It's entertaining. It's just, again, it's like the other cultural impacts that it's had, like Jeff Wayne's soundtrack, that's really, really famous. The chances of anything coming from Mars are 1,000,000 to 1. Everybody's heard that. That's not from... Although, is that in the book? Now I'm confusing myself whether that line is in the book or not. I don't think it is. I think it's just in the...
somewhere around here. I'll have to read it.
Yeah, I think it's just in the musical, rather than the book, that line. But I'm sure somebody in the comments will correct me if I'm wrong. It wouldn't be the first time.
Yes.
But yeah, it's just... There's that, the Orson Welles radio, the 4 different movies. It seems to be like a movie of it made every 20 years. The last one with Tom Cruise wasn't too bad.
And I think there have been movies that have been made that have not been like direct makes of the movie. Like, was it Battle of Los Angeles, I think?
Yeah.
Was basically War of the Worlds.
I think probably Independence Day is as well.
Probably, yeah.
That again is...
so dynamic for what we know of as alien warfare. The alien invasion story, it probably started here, and it was done really, really well.
Yeah, that gradual build-up. Like the cylinders are in the earth, and there's all these people playing around. What's going on here? And the soldiers are trying to keep order. It's like you know it's coming. It builds the tension in you the whole way. It's really effective. I really like it, and I'm really quite happy when I see like young people reacting to it in schools as well.
So, did you guys have a lot of science fiction in school that you guys read? Because we had almost none.
No, virtually nothing. In fact, did a fair bit at uni, but virtually nothing. It'd be now you would say Kazuo Ishiguro, Never Let Me Go. I believe they do that as a GCSE text now.
Okay.
And that is sort of science fiction-ish, and that I think it's set a little bit in the future. But I think that's as close as it gets. I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
The one that we did do was Fahrenheit 451. I did read that in school.
Okay. No, we don't. I've never seen that. In fact, I tried to get that into the school when I was working there as part of their reading club, and they rejected it. So it's just like, no. Just...
not a book about burning books. No, we're not doing that. No. So what about your books that you would put on this list?
Do you want to discuss what you felt about the list generally before we do that?
I felt like the list leaned very heavily to books written before the 1970s.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
I don't see a lot of books mid 80s on that I think are really, really good. There's a few in here, but and almost nothing from the 90s that was really, really good. And I'm not sure exactly when it was written. I think you said 2001.
No, I think it's either 2005 or 2010. So
Okay.
it is into
Yeah,
the 2000s.
So really stuff that's just a lot older on this list.
I think in the defense of that is that science fiction is not in a great place right now. And I think a little part of that, I don't know if we discussed it before, is this idea that H.G. Wells, Jules Verne, kind of created modern science fiction. Edgar Rice Burroughs took the next step. Then you have people like Asimov, Bradbury, Heinlein, who then moved that on. But what they were doing a lot of the time was building on what had gone before. And what I think has happened since then is not so much a building on, is a copying of. And then what you get is a copy of a copy of a copy. And you get some really mediocre science fiction. And we both read Lost Fleet. And I'm not saying that's really mediocre, it's better than mediocre. And I would put it among some of the better modern science fiction. But if you put it back an era, it wouldn't be close. And that's kind of an indication, I think, that standards are in decline. I think that's probably why there's this focus on the first text to do a thing. It's kind of like why we study Steinbeck in school, because the depiction of Lenny was one of the first depictions in popular fiction, of somebody with, I don't know how to say it in politically correct terms, but he has some
I
sort of
think he was
mental,
technically mentally retarded. Like
yeah,
my cousin, his literal diagnosis is he's mentally retarded.
right,
And it's become a bad word.
yeah,
But sometimes there's nothing else wrong with them. They're just their intelligence level is below, I believe, 85. IQ level of less than 85. You're technically mentally
yeah.
retarded, and because we've used it as an insult, it has become a word you don't want to say.
Yeah, that's basically where I was at. Was I didn't want to say it, but that's
Yeah.
kind of the fact. And I think, but taking it back to the science fiction is like that's why we see Clockwork Orange. It's a good book in its own
Mhm.
right, but this idea, this future culture, this future slang language, he's one of the first to do it. So he's on the list. He's also, I think, got something to say about, though it's set in the future, our current social situations or the situations of the time. And I think that the list for me has a real focus on what you might call in the Victorian age a social problem novel. Like I'm going to talk about poverty, I'm going to talk about racism, but I'm going to do it in a subtle way. Like Heinlein would talk about racism, but it would be the racism between the people of Earth and the people of Venus or Mars, for example, rather
Two
than,
completely different races.
yeah, but he's talking about white and black people, but he's doing it by analogy, by being clever and by being subtle, rather than just getting the big old hammer out and going, this is racism and it's bad, which makes for a pretty poor book most of the time.
Mhm.
So there is that. I like 1984. Is 1984 a fun read? No,
No.
not for any human being that ever lived. Is it a fun read? But it has something to say about the social situation, about socialism, basically. So it's on the list. I think it deserves to be on this because of the quality of the storytelling as well and the writing as well. But it's just an example of social problem novels that dominate the list. There's lots of things about humanity, where we're going, where we've been, about gender, about social class and crime, and it's all there. And I think that dominates this. You don't have anything on there for me that you go outright, that is a fun, enjoyable read.
Yeah, I think you have a great point there. Like a lot of this stuff is an idea book where you put forward ideas, and modern science fiction is really focusing on story. How does this make you feel instead of what does this make you think about? Um, and I think Snow Crash that I read recently, it made me think all kinds of neat and interesting thoughts, but the story was meh. Um, but the amount of thinking I did about the book afterward is part of the reason I enjoy sci-fi,
Yeah,
because you can read a book but you'll always have a little bit of that in your mind because it put forth neat and interesting ideas that you'll have to think about later.
that's one of the reasons why I recommended Starship Troopers to you, and why I
Hmm.
said when I did, is that you may not love it, but you will have a reaction to it. And there's something to be said for that, the science fiction that just makes you think. But if you can pin a story on it that's entertaining and enjoyable, then that's, for me, what I'm looking for in my science fiction. I want an idea, I want something to think about, but I want to be able to enjoy my time as well.
Oh yeah.
And there's
So
a little, not quite enough enjoyable science fiction on the list.
yeah, yeah, I would agree. Like I told you with Hyperion, there's not a whole lot of new ideas, but the way that the story is presented, um, I it's on my list. I'll start with that one if you want.
Okay, yeah, go for it.
Um, Basically, it's the Canterbury Tales. Is how I've never read the Canterbury Tales, so I don't know, but that's how I've heard it described. You have the end of the world is coming, and these, I believe, 7 people go on a pilgrimage to meet the Shrike. Every night, the Shrike kills 99.9% of the people that come to visit it, and it grants some wishes. And so
Okay,
these people are going to the Shrike. They all have different backgrounds, different reasons for going there. There's a warrior, there's a father, there's um, uh, the consulate for the planet of Hyperion that they're on. There's a bounty hunter, or is she a bounty hunter? She's something like that. Um, and they all have something, and they start slowly to tell their story. And so you change perspectives. The first guy who tells his story, he's a priest, and the he is going because of his mentor, who went to Hyperion and met a group of people who were homogenous. Um, I won't spoil much about the story, but like
No,
it's
because
it's
I
an
do want to
interesting
read it.
it's a very interesting start. So he meets these homogenous people who are low in intelligence and all look pretty similar to one another, and he's studying them to try to see if because they have a lot of cross symbology in their um, in the things that they do, the things they call the cruciform is what they call it. So he has to pass by these violently electrified trees, and they're only not electrified for a short amount of time. So he goes in to meet them as a missionary type person, and then he has like 3 months that he has to spend with them, and then the trees will stop being electrified for like a week, and then he's going to leave,
Hmm.
and it's his time. And so it's his story being told by his protege, and so they're telling his story, whatever. And then it moves on to the next character and the next character. The father's story had me just bawling like a baby. Like his daughter's aging backwards, and he's trying to find a cure for her aging backwards. Um, and just as she gets slight younger day by day, she forgets the things of those days. So
Right.
she's losing the memories that they created together. Um, just heartbreaking as a father. And great storytelling. Not a lot of new sci-fi,
Mm.
but the story of it is why I believe it's so good.
Okay. Excellent. That is one that I have bought since we started doing this video to read, plus your recommendation of your video review rather on your channel, which I have watched. So
Hmm.
it's one that I'm quite looking forward to getting round to, but I have a lot of books to get round to. So I'm going to go with one that I actually do feel it should be on the list. I've got others in that I'm going to discuss that I think perhaps to put them on a list of 100 great sci-fi is a bit of a stretch, but we'll get to the reasons why. But this one I actually do think should be on there, and it's one that I think pretty much anybody in the current era is going to know something about because it's Star Wars, and it's written by
The first Star Wars, New
yeah,
Hope.
yeah, A New Hope. It's credited to George Lucas, but it's written by Alan Dean Foster, who's a sci-fi writer of enough repute on his own, who's also written other books in the Star Wars era. I think perhaps one of the books that he got, Splinter of the Mind's Eye, which came out shortly after this, was probably his payment
Hmm.
for not having his name on this. But the reason is obviously the story of Star Wars is phenomenal. The energy of it comes across in the book really well as well, but it also adds a little bit to the story about the galaxy and the people that populate it. There's like a little bit at the beginning that tells you the history of how Palpatine rose to power. Um, it's just a really, really well done novelization. It does everything that you would want from a novelization of a film, and that it expands upon as well as capturing the energy of that film. So I think that Star Wars by Alan Dean Foster is an excellent book,
I wrote it down because I didn't even know that existed.
and yeah, it's well worth getting. This one, I don't know
Heck
if you
yeah.
can see, is falling apart a little bit. It's been with me since the early 80s. I'm showing my age.
I have a few books like that where it's like I have to be so gentle with it.
Okay, so what have you got that's next?
All right, so I'm gonna take one off the list because we talked about it, 2033.
Okay,
Um, I don't believe I only put it on there because I didn't see any horror on this list. Um, and I think that is a big part of science fiction, that's the alluring part of it.
hmm,
Um, so I will switch to a different book, and this is Stephen King, The Stand, which
right,
is super poignant for this time. I blew through this book, found it amazingly interesting. Basically, a super flu is created in a lab, and this super flu, yeah, I know, um, gets out, and 99% of the people die. It blows through the United States, and you come to find out that because America's getting devastated by it, they send it everywhere else too. They said we're not going to be the only ones to die from
Oh,
this.
nice.
The American government does that. Yeah, they're very very nice people. Those American government people. Um, and so it's the story of the survivors, and most of them are from the East, and they're getting these dreams about a greener, better world and an old lady who's kind of a prophet. It's the light and dark story. He ties a lot of biblical um, terminology in all of his books. I'm reading the Bible in a year right now, and so many of like the Dark Tower settings are straight from the Bible. Um, which I don't think he might be a Christian. I don't know, but
Yeah.
he pulls very hard from Christianity and the Bible. Um, but yeah, I think The Stand, personally, it's not my favorite of his books. The 11/22/63 is my favorite book he wrote that I've read. But it's up there. It's my top three for sure.
But the best science fiction, or just that horror flavor, pushing it into the.
Horror slash science fiction, I think, with the super flu, I think it counts.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying it doesn't count. I'm just saying that's what pushes it into the top 100 must-read sci-fi for you, is that
Hmm.
additional flavoring of the horror genre.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to go on to my next one, which is one you may have heard of, and it is one that is basically owes a huge debt to Heinlein, which you'll see when I'll show you the cover. I'm going to show it there first.
Armor.
John Steakley's Armour.
Let me write that down.
And basically, if you've read Vampires by John Steakley, which you should, because that's a phenomenal book, then you'll recognize all the character names are the same in this story. And it's got that same sort of theme of I've joined the military knowing that it's a death sentence because they're in this war against, not bugs. Oh, no, that would be copying. They're fighting ants. So it's like, yeah, that's how you get away with not getting sued, is it? So it's got powered armor and stuff like that. It's just so similar, but there's more exploration of the war. And then what makes it a cut above your average science fiction, because in every other respect I would say it is pretty average, is the way the narrator changes, and it switches from a first person to a third person about halfway through and switches the character telling the story. And that, I think, is done in a really interesting way, and it sort of elevates the book above what would basically be a little bit derivative without that. So yeah, John Steakley's Armour I recommend for that reason, for just to see an author doing something a little bit unexpected, as opposed to sort of really, is it one of the 100 must reads? Probably not, but it is interesting nonetheless, particularly if you're a fan of Heinlein, to read that first half and go, wow, how did they not get sued? John Steakley's Armour.
That's pretty funny. One that it's more for the entire universe. 1632 by I can't think of any author's names right now. I should have written down his name. His name. The minute we stop talking about it, I'll think about it. But 1632 is basically in the year 2000 or 2001, a West Virginia town, like 3 mile radius West Virginia town, is cut out because of aliens. They don't go into it, and they're not going to go into it. But something happens and creates this dynamic, interesting alternate universe. So a 3 mile radius of this West Virginia town called Grantville, West Virginia, is taken to southern Germany in 1632.
Okay.
And then just the explosion of what would happen if our morals, our politics, our advanced technology, and these are working class people, so they can recreate most of what's going on. They bring back a coal power plant, so the people that are there are able to get the power plant back up and running. All the lines have been severed, but they're able to get the town powered again. They're able to get they immediately, and it's in the middle of the 30 Years War. The Holy War between the Holy Roman Empire, or the Holy Roman Empire, and the Swedish king that's coming down. He's a Lutheran. And then there's some Calvinists from Scotland that are coming and fighting. And basically, all of Central Europe was in devastating chaos. So American technology is brought into this horrendous war where really artillery was starting. The Swedish king is Adolf. I can't remember. It's been a little while since I read the book, but the books are just fantastically fun. They explore the world. Like it starts out where he actually lets people write stories in the world, and so you could write a story about a certain character as long as it fits into the narrative, and submit it to the website, and he would put you in his compilation books that he's created.
Okay.
Basically, if you want to give a side character a story, and as long as it makes sense thematically, he reviews it and looks it over, he'll add it to the official canon. Really interesting universe where he's like, give me your ideas, bring them to me, let's try. And if it doesn't work out that way, he might credit you with this is the way this story progresses. So it starts out, it's 1632, 1633, the next eventual year, and then at 1634 everything has expanded so much that he can't fit it in one book. So 1634, there's different subsets.
Right. Okay.
I think they're up to 1637 or 1638, and there's more and more and more and more things going on. So for this is more of a pick for the universe.
Right.
I think should be added because we don't see a lot of alternate history. Alternate history is an interesting, one of my favorite sci-fi subgenres. Harry Turtledove does a wonderful job with it. Like I talked about in The Guns of the South and How Few Remain. What if the South won the Civil War? Stories like what if at the start of World War II, aliens invaded. I think that book is called Second Contact. And so aliens invade, and we have to all team up together to fight off the aliens. So Hitler becomes a not bad guy. Martin Luther King doesn't get shot. He becomes like a huge political figure who is very anti-alien, like really interesting thought processes that alternate history adds. So some books in the alternate history genre, I think, should be added to the list.
Yeah, I mean, that is, like you say, a big concept, an idea, a what if. Like you're saying about science fiction making you think and explore a new idea, even if the story itself isn't particularly spectacular. So I think, why not? And it's interesting as well, because if you're talking about sort of Martin Luther King being the voice of like opposition to the alien, that's almost the exact opposite of at least what he's famous for. So what would it take to make you switch on against everything that you believed? Do you know what I mean? It's like a really interesting concept. You could write a lot of books just exploring that idea, and probably never ever you'd die with still ideas sort of being put to paper because it's such a wide-ranging concept, I think.
It's interesting to see, like, if something so foreign it comes in and is hostile, you probably look at the guy next to you and go, he might have a different skin color, but he's me.
Yeah.
And this thing has tentacles. It's not me. We're okay now. We're good. We're against that.
Yeah. I think that's probably been the driving force of quite a lot of sci-fi of the alien invasion type, is the unification of Earth. Like you see, even we talked about Independence Day, like even that does it, doesn't it? I think, with the Russians sort of coming to join the Americans, sort of.
Oh yeah. So
it's been a long time since I saw it, but anyway.
I haven't seen the new one. I don't think it's very good. Or at least I've heard it's not very good.
I've seen it, and it's just not worth your time. It's just not very good at all. It's a real. I mean, it was always going to be for me after 20 years. Some people get excited, and I just go, it's going to be awful. They've left it too long.
Could we make something new, please?
Yeah.
Don't remake something old.
So,
what's your next one?
I'm going to show you this one, would have tied much more nicely in with The Stand, because it is, showing it here first, and it's Survivors by Terry Nation, which I reviewed on my channel. It's another "a virus has wiped out the world, what do we do now" sort of book, but the way it depicts, I mean, it's a little old-fashioned because it was written, I think, in the 60s or the 70s. It's a little old-fashioned and very English middle class. But it is really quite interesting the way it explores not just how we act as things are collapsing, but how we act afterwards as well. And there was a quote, I think, from the author Terry Nation in the time. It's like, the people that don't survive might end up being the lucky ones. And it's become a little bit of a cliche for the genre, but it's a really interesting thought. And what happens is resoundingly grim. And there's a TV series of it too, in fact, by the BBC, but the book is darker than both of them. So I recommend the book. I think it's really good. I think, again, like The Stand, it suddenly seems rather topical. And it's quite well written for a guy famous for TV scripts rather than novels. I think this is his only novel that he wrote. But he is more famous for things like Doctor Who. I think he created the Daleks. If you have seen Doctor Who,
the Daleks.
Yeah, he created them.
Yeah.
So, Survivors by Terry Nation. It's a really good book. I think it should be on the top 100, because not only does it deal with ideas and concepts of might makes right and political systems, but it also deals with people in a really human way, as well as being a really entertaining, if somewhat dark story. It's just everything you'd want in sci-fi, as far as I'm concerned.
I like how our list of things we think should be added are different. Like, we don't have a same look. My next one would be probably my favorite Michael Crichton book. I don't know if you've read a lot of Michael Crichton.
One or two.
But Jurassic Park is good, and I think it was excellent. But I believe Sphere had a level of what's going on here. What we initially think's happening is not what's happening. Something else is happening. Something then interesting happens again. Everything we're thinking kind of turns on its head. Very science fiction, whodunit, but what happens next in this story? They go deep underwater, so there's always the looming danger of being, if something happens, you're underwater. But it's an alien, hostile environment. It's not space, but it's very similar to space. Yeah, Sphere was great. The movie was good. The book was good. Very well done.
I have seen the film, but I saw it when it came out, so I remember nothing about it now. And I own the book. But it's one of those ones where it's like, I will get to that eventually, and haven't done for quite some time. But if it's worth checking out, then I'll try and boost it up the list.
Last time I checked, there's a free audiobook version on YouTube.
Oh, right.
And that's how I listened to it. And it was very well done. The audiobook version was good as well.
Okay. I might check that out instead then. Right. So I'm going to show a book now, and the idea that it would be on the list of 100 must-read science fictions is a little bit laughable, but I'll show it. I'm showing it here first, and then I'll show it. Yeah, it's Buck Rogers. And the reason that I'm showing it is because it is just classic Edgar Rice Burroughs style adventurism. It's about a man. I mean, it does, if you wanted to sort of read more into it than is necessary, it is about a man overthrowing a despotic government. But it's just good guy doing good things, meeting beautiful women on an adventure that's like every page is a page with something exciting or entertaining happening on it. It's just a really, really fun story. And it is the sort of story that if you're a young man like I was when I picked it up, it's, again, been with me since the 80s, it's the sort of book that starts a love affair with science fiction. So that, in that regard, I think is something that's missing from the list, is just that sense of wonder almost. It was so bogged down.
When was it written?
Early 80s. 1982 would be my guess.
Oh, really? I didn't think it. I thought it was like 50s.
I'm 3 years out, 1979. But it is just fun. With some great characters like Buck Rogers, Wilma Deering, all of those people are fun on the TV screen. They're fun on the page as well. I don't even really like Buck Rogers, the TV series, all that much. I've seen bits of it and I'm kind of like, meh.
Yeah.
But the book is that level of fun that for a young person, it gets a young person into science fiction. I think there's nothing wrong with that. So that's why I'm recommending it. I'm putting it out there. Buck Rogers. That's number 2. It's That Man on Beta, which is the better of that series that I've read.
All right. So this next one is one that I think should be switched out. Like I said, Journey to the Center of the Earth and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. I think you should switch the two on the list because I think 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea is a much better book.
Okay. What is it about it that elevates it above the other one?
For the first part, it is believable. They're in a submarine, which we now know at the time was giant science fiction, but we now know it's possible. They talk about the as they got deeper and deeper, they increased the pressure. There was a narwhal, a giant kraken, and it was told in kind of that adventurer style. They go out searching for a monster, and instead they find Captain Nemo on a submarine, and he takes them to miraculous underwater things, and he shows them the glory of the underwater world and why he's trying to protect it. He's destroying ships that are hurting the ocean. Really, really well done story, and I think it's much better than Journey to the Center of the Earth is fun. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea is great sci-fi.
Wow. Great sci-fi is what you would expect to find on the list, right? So why not? Mm-hmm. So my next choice is a little bit of a cheat because it isn't a book. It's a graphic novel. So
I say that is definitely okay with me.
It is the Ballad of
Halo Jones?
The Ballad of Halo Jones. And it's from the pages of a British comic called 2000 AD. It's again from the early 80s. It's now I won't pretend that female protagonists were a new thing in the 80s because Robert Heinlein had been doing that since the 50s. However, they were still relatively rare, and to base an entire comic book on one was new, particularly in the UK. I won't speak for American comics. And a science fiction one at that. And it all starts with a very ordinary girl. I think she's unemployed. She's been booted out of the city because they don't want unemployed people in the city. So they put all their unemployed people on this island and they're just like enclosed in the whole time. And she sees a ship, a cruise ship going out into space. And she thinks, I want to be on that ship. Anything's better than here. And she's proved rather wrong. However, you can't deny that she goes out, she has an adventure, she meets interesting and weird aliens and creatures, she swims with space dolphins, she meets a general that she fights combat in high gravity where time's diluted, and it's as bonkers as you could probably get for a comic book, but it has real heart. And there's a prologue to book 2 where the narrator of the book is talking, and he sets it up like he's talking to a class of students who are studying Halo. And one of them says to him, "Why did you never get married, sir?" And he says, "Because my whole life I've been in love with somebody who couldn't love me back." And it turns out that obviously he's talking about Halo, who had died in a previous generation, and that he'd always loved her. And I think that if you pick up this book and you read it and you don't feel that toxic male desire to protect an innocent female struggling who doesn't need your help, but her life would be easier if she had it, and it's just, she goes through so much that by the end of it you're just like heartbroken for her. And I just don't see how you could have any other reaction to the story. It's a phenomenal piece of storytelling. It's Alan Moore, who went on to do I think more famous in America for, I think, Batman. I could be wrong that I'm not big with American comics, as you probably know. And
I'm pretty sure he did League of Extraordinary Gentlemen and Watchmen, I believe.
yeah, I think that wouldn't. I think Watchmen is him. He is kind of famous for being a little bit insane, and that does come across in the book. But the artwork, this is not going to show up well. It's black and white here. It was printed in some editions in colour. It's Ian Gibson, who is really famous around the time for his work with 2000 AD. Not one of my most famous, one of my more favourite artists. Got a very distinct style that probably isn't for everybody, but if you look at the pages, it's just, I don't know, there's something, you just turn to any random page and there's something oddly glorious or bizarre. I think that's some of the low gravity fighting. So it's hard to see on the screen, I know, but yes, just phenomenal. One of the best characters I think I've ever read in science fiction. So although it's a graphic novel, highly, highly recommended. Absolutely 100% on by any metric you throw at it when you're making a list of the greatest science fiction. For me, it would hit every criteria you throw. Does it deal with social issues? Yes. Does it have like somebody from a underrepresented background? Absolutely. Does it have all the science fiction entertainment? Yes. Is it crazy and bonkers? Absolutely, but it's got real heart as well. So Halo Jones, can't recommend it highly enough. Right, I've got another book, and this is a book that I'm going to send you. This one and the one that comes before it, because although this one is the best one, it's the second in the series. I think you do need to have the first one to fully understand all that's going on in the second one, and it is Better Than Life. It's the second Red Dwarf book. Now, if you've seen Red Dwarf the series, which I think you haven't, but we talked about it, is that
I want to eventually.
Better Than Life on the TV series was a game where you sort of you wish for something, you would get it. Like, I want an Aston Martin, there's an Aston Martin. I want a cheese sandwich, there's a cheese sandwich. You just get it. But in the book, what makes it remarkable is that it gives you the things you don't know that you want. So Lister, who's the protagonist of the book, ends up basically living in a copy of Bedford Falls from It's a Wonderful Life, where everybody's forever affirming each other and having this sort of simple but wonderful storybook existence. And that's because at heart, Lister is a nice person. The problem that Lister has is that Rimmer, his companion, is not a nice person. And what he apparently wants is to be divorced by his supermodel wife, who's cheated on him with an army of other men, then to marry somebody else who's remarkably like his mother, and then to have his consciousness trapped in the body of a female prostitute who crashes an oil tanker through the middle of Bedford Falls. So that's the sort of book that you're getting into if you pick up Better Than Life. It deals with the absolute insanity of the TV series, dials it up way beyond 11 in a way that you never ever could on TV, because you simply couldn't have the money or the time to make these stories this way. So some of the stories are based on TV episodes, but take them to entirely new levels of hideousness. And they're like, as well, they're written in a similar style at times, and all the way through to Terry Pratchett.
I enjoy Terry Pratchett.
And what they'll do is like Terry Pratchett, they'll be telling the story, and then they'll just break off to give you a little bit of history about how the story got to that point. For example, they're talking about genetically engineered life forms, and they talk about sport, which is in the headlines for reasons at the moment as well, with the transgender lobby and people born males competing against women. Well, in genetically engineered sports, they engineered people to be good at that sport. So a basketball player would be 8 foot tall and basically a giant X, massive long legs, massive long arms, and nothing much else. And after about 3 minutes of genetically engineered sports, ordinary sport was no more. Nobody was interested. They only wanted genetically engineered sports. And then in the football, soccer to you guys, World Cup, Scotland had qualified for the World Cup, which is a rare thing in itself. But the thing with Scotland is they've never been past the first round of a World Cup, and it's something that is kind of like a joke made against Scotland's football team. So Scotland decide to field a goalkeeper. Now, the goalkeeper, or tender in some of your North American sports, is a slab of meat that fills the entire goal so that nothing could possibly ever go in. And all this is related in like a footnote, like in the style of Terry Pratchett. And the thing that makes it obviously a little bit for the British audience is that despite having this slab of meat in goal, Scotland still can't get past the first round. So Better Than Life is a wonderful book, and it is absolutely just pure enjoyment. And I don't really think that if I see a list that doesn't have this, I feel like it's the snobbery of the Academy, when they do the film awards, that never ever give anything to a comedy. And it's just like, so I can't discuss social issues. I can't represent underrepresented people, and I can't do that in a humorous way. I think you'll find you can. So
that definitely speaks to why in the world was Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy not on this list?
Yeah. Was it not?
I don't think so.
Okay, yeah, I've just noticed that it's not. That again, it must purely be down to snobbery, because in terms of the cultural impact of that book, that has
fantastic
been beyond science fiction, isn't it? People understand, even people that have never read a science fiction book of any description know that the meaning of life is 42 and things like that. It's just...
I listened, this is how long ago I first read this book. So I read it, and after one of my summer camp counselors, to get us to all fall asleep, we were probably 11, 12, 13, something like that, played on video cassette the book. And the part, so I'm sitting there listening to it at night, and the part where the missile gets turned into a whale, and this is what I think would happen when a missile gets turned to a whale as he falls to Earth. And it just, his thought process, oh, what is this all around me? It's wind. And like just rolling laughing in my bed. It's like, this book's supposed to put me to sleep. I'm wide awake. I'm laughing. I'm like falling out of my bed because it's so funny. Great memories of that book.
The thing,
I haven't gone farther past that book. I have all the after so long, thanks for all the fish, Restaurant at the End of the Universe. I have them all. Haven't read them yet, but the first one is just marvelous.
I've read, I think, the first 4, but it was interesting that more recently I reread the first one, and that all of the good bits from the series that I remembered, and I remembered them as being spread across 4 books, were all in the first one. Like the saying about the whale's thought processes, and people remember that the meaning of life is 42. Some people will remember that the mice built the Earth as a supercomputer, or they'll remember that it was demolished, or they'll remember the babblefish, because these things have transcended the genre. But the thing for me that I always remember is that the secret to flying is to throw yourself at the ground and miss. How does it not get on the list? It's got to be, hadn't it?
Yeah. Or always bring a towel.
Yeah. It's snobbery, isn't it? It has to be, because any other metric by which you judge the book, then Douglas Adams should be on there.
Oh, of course.
So I think that's one that neither of us recommended of our own volition, but we both agree should be on there. Douglas Adams, absolutely, it should.
For sure.
So it also turns out that when we recorded that video, we didn't record any sort of outro. So on behalf of Ramsey, Rajathon, goodbye, and don't forget to subscribe to his channel as well as mine if you haven't, obviously. I hope you agreed with at least some of the picks that we proposed. I think Douglas Adams, that sort of the late epiphany that we had that it wasn't on the list at all, is an absolute must inclusion on any must-read science fiction list. So overlooked that. I'm sure you agree it was a bit of a shocker. Anyway, let me know your picks in the comments. Let me know if you agreed with our picks, what you felt of the list. I know I haven't sort of printed the whole list here because of copyright issues. I didn't want to get, a strike. If you're interested in the list, you probably should buy that book. You can always contact me on Twitter if you want to know a little bit more about it. Anyway, so yes, goodbye from me. And if you stay tuned to the channel, then I have a number of reviews coming up of some of the absolute classics that were on the list that we actually found out that I hadn't read. So I've got Brave New World, I've got Midwich Cuckoos, which I've read, and there's a review coming. I've got The Death of Grass, which wasn't on the list, but it's John Christopher, who's quite famous in science fiction. You've probably heard of him. I've got Jack Womack's Random Acts of Senseless Violence, which sounds just amazing. So I'm really looking forward to reading that. And if I can persuade Ramsey to do it, I'm really hoping to do a joint video on the strengths and wonderful virtues of both, or the original two, because there's more now, the original two Red Dwarf books, which is kind of called Infinity, but really called Red Dwarf, and Better Than Life, which probably heard me talking about on the video if you made it this far. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more of this sort of thing. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.